Hey everyone, welcome back to the Practice Period podcast. Today I am here with 2020 Olympian Foluke Akinradewo and pelvic floor physical therapist Melia Perrizo. And I'm so excited to have both of them here today to talk about the journey getting Foluke to the Olympics and what that process has looked like. She's somebody that I worked with a little bit, and Melia was able to work with throughout her pregnancy and postpartum return to the Olympics. And we're really excited to share her story and just everything that took place. So Foluke, thank you so much for being here. Melia, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll start with Foluke. So tell us a little bit about your athletic history and who you are, what you're about, and just give us some insight there.
Oh gosh. Well, I grew up playing three sports. Started my volleyball career in high school. I'd played basketball and ran track, and volleyball was not my thing, but my high school coach, Lisa Zielinski, convinced me to try out. And so my sophomore year, I joined the team, and I was awful, god awful, but I loved it. I loved the challenge, and I knew I had potential in the sport. So I'm always excited about growth and learning. And so it just has been, I think my career has just been one thing after another. I never really had long-term goals. It was just what's next. And so I was able to play through high school. I was on the youth and junior national teams. And then I joined the national team after graduating from high school my senior year. Wow. And then I went to Stanford and played there for 4 years. And then I've had professional career for, definitely like about 11 years or so I've been playing overseas, and I'm actually currently in Japan for my season. So yeah, just traveling the world, and I've gotten to add my husband and son with me on my journey.
That's so amazing. It's really incredible to have such longevity in a sport like that. It's really amazing. Melia, tell us a little bit about you and your practice.
Yeah, I'm a pelvic floor physical therapist, but I also, I started out in orthopedics. And so really meshed the two when I was noticing most of my low back ladies coming in an orthopedic setting were saying, oh, I also have leaking, postpartum or pain with intercourse, and then started treating pelvic floor and realizing a lot of the low back pain symptoms were going away. So when I meshed those two worlds, it's been a journey, but I love really that postpartum return to fitness and getting women back safely to that.
God, it's so fun. It's so rewarding. And Foluke, you have such a Cinderella story, so to speak, when it comes to, becoming a mom, making the team, and becoming a starter, and then winning a gold medal. It's incredible. But also there's so much that has happened behind the scenes to get you to that moment, right? And so that's what we'd like to talk to you both today about. And so we'll back up a little bit. Foluke, when did you reach out to me? When did we connect? I can't even remember.
Yes. My good friend Angie Forsett, when I was trying to debate on whether or not I wanted to get pregnant during my season and what that would look like, once I reached out to her because she knew you, and I mean, she's now pregnant with her fifth and does CrossFit, and she's amazing, an incredible athlete. So anyway, she told me to contact you. So this was probably about maybe like 8 or 9 weeks, I would say, potentially into my pregnancy. And she was like, you're the person I need to reach out to if I want to do this thing right. And so I did.
Oh, I'm so grateful for you both. And then based on where you were living at the time, I knew that Melia would be an excellent point person. I always like, Melia, you're like in the San Clemente ish area,
yes.
California. And so I send all of my Southern California, San Diego area, or like Temecula area out to Melia. And she's helped so many different people that I've worked with over time. And I knew, and I was like, okay, well, if I can't be there all the time in person, helping and seeing, like, it's going to be so beneficial to at least have a point person who's local enough to see throughout pregnancy and postpartum, especially. So that's how those two connected.
Yeah,
really
I think
awesome.
I saw Foluke first when I think she was about 12 weeks pregnant is when she finally came into the office.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is so great from a trying to control the things we can. There's so much education that's missing for so many people, especially for athletes that have big goals ahead of them, right? And so getting that information and that support early on can really make a big difference in just learning more about your body. So some of those tendencies that, and some things we can't control, other things we can. So Melia, what was the first visit like from a clinical standpoint, since we do have a lot of different PTs and coaches who listen to this podcast?
Yeah, it was fun working with Fluke in the beginning. She was 12 weeks pregnant when she first came in. And, that first meeting when she says, okay, my due date's in November and I have to plan to return to court in April and be fully able to play in, I think, June. It was like, okay, we have some work to do.
Yeah.
And with, I think in that first session, we had noticed that you had already started doing some doming. And so we had already looking at kind of the diastasis stuff and kind of changing some of your mechanics and how you were turning on abs, what you were doing with that. And I think at that point you were already comfortable with pulling back in some of your training sessions and competitive play at that point. And so I didn't have to do any of that convincing. You had already kind of made those decisions on your own. And just, but it was definitely like, okay, we have some work to do postpartum. And that, I think that was the biggest challenge of we have a timeline.
Yeah. And Foluke, what was that like for you being 12 weeks pregnant where you're like, well, I still feel good-ish, like getting that trust of going to somebody and reaching out to Melia or reaching out to me for some feedback when obviously you're a really great athlete. You've been doing this for so many years. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I think, obviously I've never been pregnant before. Yes, I'm an athlete, but I've never been a pregnant athlete. And I knew that there was a short window in terms of when I wanted to be able to return to sport, to be back in an elite level, to make the Olympic team, if the Olympics had happened in 2020. And so I just want to do everything in my power to do it right. And I know, Bree, when we spoke, we talked about how in the media you see all these athletes and some of them, like running when they're 20 weeks or 5 months pregnant or et cetera. And people think that that's what is the norm, because if you're an athlete, of course you should be able to do that, but is that what's right for you? And something that's stuck with me that you said is that, we're athletes for our whole lives. This isn't just a short-term goal. I have a short-term goal of making an Olympic team, but I want to be an athlete for the rest of my life. Yeah. And so what can I do to make sure that I'm doing this the right way? And so I think for me, the biggest challenge, because while I was ready to pull back, truthfully, the biggest challenge was, with my staff, because what you see portrayed on the media of athletes and pregnant athletes, what they can do, people have that in their mind, like that's what, you should do, you're an elite athlete. And so I think it just took a lot of talking and negotiating and educating really on our end. Leah and Bree, like you guys helped me out with that as well. And I think eventually we were able to get to a good place with that. But I think from the get-go, like I knew that I wanted to do this right.
Yeah, well, I love everything you said. And something I have to remind people of all the time is like pregnant athletes and postpartum athletes are not fragile, but they're also not invincible. So how do we set ourselves up the best way that we can right now on behalf of our long-term goal, whether it's the Olympics or whether it's just to be like a recreational exercise or whatever that might be? Like, are we making choices now that support our long-term? And that can be really hard to get buy-in on, right? From coaching staff to maybe your CrossFit coach or your physical therapist or just like yourself. Like it's hard to get that buy-in yourself of like, well, I've always done this or it still feels okay, but being able to make some of those adjustments before you actually need to, Right. Yeah. Well, I love that. So talk to us a little bit about what your pregnancy training was like after you met with us initially, and you started to like find your own voice and get more of a good, I guess, basis of education and knowledge around it. What was your training actually like?
Yeah, so gosh, I can't remember too well, but I think a lot has happened. A lot's happened. It's been a while. I think I want to say by 16 weeks, I was for sure done with jumping. And then I already have like a a modified lifting program because I had a history of back issues and knee issues. So I wasn't doing Olympic lifting even before my pregnancy. So it actually made that transition pretty seamless, of doing things that, you know, were right for me. So I think one of the adjustments was definitely with heart rate on the bike. But yeah, I mean, I was still lifting, but not as heavy with my weights. But because I wasn't doing Olympic lifting to begin with, it was pretty easy.
Yeah. And were you still playing? Were you like still practicing on the court and stuff?
Yeah, I was practicing the court probably until, gosh, I don't remember. I want to say 16, maybe 20 weeks. I definitely stopped jumping before that. I remember, Melia, we were talking about that, like, what's the, you know, how long can I go with jumping, and is it even going to be beneficial to keep doing that? And, you know, for the pelvic floor health and all that stuff. So I think, I want to say by 16 weeks, I don't know if you remember better than I do. But I was still doing like court stuff. Yeah. But not jumping.
Right. So you're still involved in doing a lot of like sport specific play, just not necessarily like out on the court with a lot of competition.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's good. And so for those of you listening, saying like, well, why did she stop jumping at 16 weeks? So it's not that she couldn't jump. She absolutely could and still be really freaking powerful. It was more of like trying to take into consideration her pelvic floor, not aggravating any symptoms that she didn't currently have. She didn't have pelvic floor symptoms at that point in time. And so we wanted to keep it that way as the baby continued to grow, as her pressure system changed throughout pregnancy, knowing her end goal is to be a high impact athlete. And so again, this was a variable that we could control. And that was a suggestion made. And then she was in a place where she felt informed enough to do that. And also, you know, tell her coaches, like, this is why. And so it was really like a good, I think we make the most progress when we have thorough understanding around why we're adjusting some of these training choices. It's not a matter of ability. It really is a matter of just like weighing all the pros and cons. Mm-hmm. But that can be really hard with like athlete brain, right? And what you're used to doing and feel like, well, I still can do it.
I think Foluke was so good about really nailing what you said to her in the beginning of, I want to be an athlete the rest of my life. And that period of pregnancy for her was, she was really able to fine tune, what do I need to do now to keep this progressing forward, where I'm not going to really make changes that could be detrimental. And I think that was a really key part for you, Foluke, because a lot of times when I'm talking to athletes, that's the hardest part, is convincing them to step back in their training. And you were all ears when we had suggestions like that. And so that was, I think, very big for you to be able to make those calls early on and have some pushback. I mean, there was definitely pushback from coaching staff of keeping you going, and you were kind of, well, this is what I'd like to do because I have the future set in my mind.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's really admirable. So tell me about, like, as pregnancy continued, like, how did you carry? How did you feel? Tell me just a little bit about the whole pregnancy experience, especially towards the end.
Yeah, I felt great my whole pregnancy. I honestly, if I didn't know I was pregnant for most of it, I wouldn't know I was pregnant. You know, I felt great. I felt, other than, you know, getting a little more winded during my workouts, but I felt really strong, probably the strongest I've felt. Yeah, I felt really good. I definitely carried my boy straight out. Like, my stomach was pointy. There was nothing.
Like the watermelon belly, right?
Yeah, like, you don't want to comment. They're like, it's so pointy. I'm like, I don't know. Like, that's just how I'm carrying. So yeah, he just went straight out. But I felt good. I felt really good. I felt like I was doing the right things. And so towards the end of my pregnancy, I cut down like how much I was lifting, started just doing more walking. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember every time she came in to a visit, you'd be like, okay, tell me what's going on. And it was like, I feel great. This feels good. I'm feeling really, really good in my body, which she did. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so then leading into getting close to delivery, Melia, did you guys go over like any tips for delivery? And then what was that process like? So you both can kind of share there.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about a lot of that pelvic floor relaxation, going through some of that breath work of making sure she could have some release work done, some even perineal stretching, taught her some of that as well, to do some self-massage for birth as well. Yeah, in Foluke.
Yeah, fun stuff.
Yeah, and that was which is so that was so helpful because I didn't know about that. So I was doing perineal stretching beforehand, yeah, and breath work, and you told me basically how to push, all that stuff. So I felt like I was well equipped and ready for whenever the time was coming.
Absolutely. And that's why it's just so beneficial if you guys listening can get in to see a pelvic floor physical therapist, pelvic health physiotherapist. It can make such a big difference. And just, I guess, adding like that extra perspective of labor and delivery in respect to your pelvic floor health, like not just the baby and not just like get the baby out right now, or not just like from a medical lens, but really like this holistic approach to supporting the woman through the process. So again, just, I like to try to help connect those dots there. If it's a possibility for you, it makes a really big difference going into birth, at least in the ways you can control. So talk to me a little bit about delivery. What was that like, labor and delivery?
I mean, all things considering, it was really good.
Yeah.
That day, I started contractions like early that morning, and I actually saw a chiropractor who worked with pregnant women. And so she did some cupping, and she was like, "Are you ready to have a baby on Thanksgiving?" This is the day before Thanksgiving. "Are you ready to have a baby on Thanksgiving Day?" And I was like, "Sure." And so that day I was feeling contractions the whole time. I like went to the movies, and watched Mr. Rogers with my parents and my husband, and I would eat popcorn in between contractions, and watch the movie. And then towards the end of the night, I was like, all right, it's time to go. And I gave birth at like 4 a.m. and probably pushed for like 45 minutes. And yeah, so that the whole thing, like, it's pretty easy.
It's so great.
When I didn't tear because of the perineal stretching, that was very beneficial. Highly recommend. The only thing was when I got up from bed, I was like, gosh, like my stomach feels empty, but I'd never given birth before. I was like, maybe that's normal. Like that's how it's supposed to feel. But I just like, I felt like there's nothing like holding me anymore. There was just nothing there. And so that was the only thing I remember from after giving birth.
That's so interesting. But I mean, it makes sense when you're an athlete, you are so aware of your body and you just have so much of a greater sense of where your body is in space and what it feels like. And it is so different when you're squishy and empty feeling and just in a different state. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Your early weeks postpartum, did that feeling continue for you? Where did you start getting worried, or like what was that experience like?
Yeah, again, I didn't know what to expect. Like I didn't know what was normal or not normal. I do remember my dad always asked me like, "Are you okay? Because you're like leaning over as you're walking." And I was like, "No, I feel perfectly fine." Like I didn't know, I didn't know what I know now that I had. But at that point, I felt okay. I think I had made it like my new normal. So I'm like, no, I feel perfectly fine. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So at what point did you go and see Melia?
Leah, when did I see you? Was it?
I think it was about 3 weeks postpartum.
3 weeks? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you delivered when was Kaede born?
Thanksgiving.
Yeah. So it was about 3 weeks later, I believe.
Okay. Yeah.
And so what was that visit like? I want to hear, Foluke, what your expectations were, what your concerns were, and then Melia, what that was like for you, meeting with her at like 3 weeks postpartum, because that's still fairly early, I think, for most people, but still like a really great thing to have that like first line of defense.
Yeah. I think because I did everything right in my mind, and I didn't have any tearing. My biggest concern, honestly, and I remember telling Lee about this, is that I didn't want to have a C-section because my mom had 3 of them, and I have really narrow hips, and I was concerned that I wouldn't be able to get the baby out and I'd have to have a C-section. And like, I didn't have to do that. I didn't tear. Like, all right, I should be good. And so I honestly didn't have any expectations going into that appointment.
Right.
Yeah.
Malia, what was your experience like?
Yeah, it was, after we had kind of, I think, communicated, by email and text, congratulations, what's going on in your body? Okay, let's get you in here. No tearing, great. So checking pelvic floor for her, making sure that was great. I mean, she was doing really well. Obviously some mild weakness going on. And then the biggest thing for us was finding that she had a pretty significant diastasis postpartum. And that was definitely okay. We have some work to do.
Right. And just for the record, because I think that so many people need to have this sense of grace, is like, you did do everything right. Like you did nothing wrong, like at
Right.
all in your training. It's just how the babe grew this time. It was
Right.
just your unique body. And that's, so many people are like, well, I didn't do this right, or I should have done more of this. And they beat themselves up so much because they feel like they should have known, or they should have done something differently. And frankly, there's just a lot of things we don't have control over. So how you carried your baby during pregnancy was probably the greatest influence on the significance of your diastasis. And that's something I think everyone needs to really keep in mind when we talk about this. So what was that like?
That was a big bummer to hear. Especially because I knew that, I had the school make the Olympic team, and this was December, January, and I had to be like good to go by May. And so, and you need so much of your core to play the sport of volleyball. So I was very bummed. I remember I was beating myself up, and you both, Bree, said the exact same thing. And Leah, like it was out of your control, the way you carried, but I definitely had a woe is me moment. Like I think everyone does when they deal with some adversity. But then it was like, okay, well, what am I going to do about it? Like, how do I fix this? How do I get to where I need to get to? So I was going to do everything in my power, because my goal from the get-go in this pregnancy, I'd seen other women do it before. I was fortunate enough to have teammates who were moms and athletes, and I want to do the same for the upcoming generation, to see that it is possible. So I want to do everything in my power to do that, and to uphold that promise I'd made to myself and to others, that I was going to get this done. So after I got to mope for some time, then I got to like, all right, let's get back to work.
Yes, I love that. And it's okay to have a grieving period postpartum for whatever experience you've had, whether it's delivery or symptoms or whatever. There is like okay, this is my current normal, and it's okay to like be upset about that and have that moment. I love that you're able to, have time to process and figure out how to take some steps forward. So just for some context, Malia, what was her diastasis measuring at early on, like an ish or a realm?
Ish, yeah. So pretty significant depth wise. I mean, I think I was going in, kind of 8 centimeters into her abdomen, all the way from kind of linea alba. I mean, all the way from the sternum all the way down to pubic bone. That was pretty significant in that depth. And then width was, we were measuring 8 to 10 on each side almost. So when she first came in that first 3 weeks, even with a head lift, I couldn't get rectus abdominis to actually fascially turn on. So there was no fascial connection with a head lift, which I did not tell Foluke this at the time, because it was already enough for her to hear that she had diastasis, and then to give her numbers. Do you remember, Foluke? I said, I won't tell you numbers at this point, because it wasn't going to do her any good to hear numbers, and then for her to go, Google, what does that mean? So we didn't even discuss numbers in those first few visits, but it was significant enough that I couldn't feel fascial load with a leg lift, a head lift in that first visit, especially. But then by that, I think that next visit that she had come in, just working on breath work and abdominal control and getting some awareness of what she needed to do, she was already starting to pull on that transverse abdominis, a little bit of rectus control. So it was once her mind was made up to, okay, I'm going to move out of this and I'm going to go for it. She started actually with Breeze programming, and we just had modified some of the positions. So I think like push-ups we had modified, and side plank, and maybe even there was one other one that we had to modify just because she was significantly doming and couldn't keep those. So we had to go into like a push up on the wall. But you had started that programming and we just kind of modified a few things.
Right. And I think I saw you around that 6 or 8 week period where you started moving more, and just to kind of get a feel for like, okay, where are we at? Like, what is the starting point now to I guess sort of project where you would be in like the 5-month period? What do we need to do now? And so even with a significant diastasis, her pathway had to look different than maybe others who had a diastasis like that, or even a less significant one. So we really had to say, okay, well, if she needs to be doing a lot of overhead movements, a lot of, reaching and like rib cage thrusting, okay, like how can we get her to do that in a way that's going to keep supporting her healing? So kind of like walking that line of like rehab, but also getting reps in towards her performance, and then combining those worlds. And that's where Melia and I had to kind of brainstorm a bit. And Foluke, you were so patient with us. I know that was a lot. So what was that like for you, kind of entering that, with a 6 to 8 week period, you're starting to introduce more fitness and saying, okay, like what is my body right now?
Yeah, that was another tough part because I didn't want to make it worse. I wanted to obviously get towards that goal and make that team get back to, my pre-pregnancy performance. But at the same time, I wanted to do it the right way. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't making it worse. And so that was like a fine balance of, all right, I don't have the strength to do certain things. I remember probably pretty early on, just like doing overhead like throwing, or eventually like serving. I was having a lot of shoulder pain, and it's because I had core strength to do what I needed to do. So it was like a really fine line and tough battle. And like you said, I had a really short amount of time to get this done. I think, if I weren't trying to make this goal, we would have had more time to do it probably a different way. But because of that, we just had to make it work.
Right. Well, and you did. So as the months went on, you started seeing some progression, working with Melia, really kind of ramping up your fitness a little bit more. Obviously, COVID changed the dynamics of a lot of different things. So as your postpartum months went on, what did the training continue to look like for you?
Yeah, so COVID hit, and the day the lockdowns went in place was the day I was supposed to start jumping for the first time. So I remember it was March 17th. And so I started jumping in my garage on a Zoom call with my strength coach, Jimmy. And so it was just different. Like I spent the rest of that spring and into summer, like in my garage, working out by myself on a Zoom call. I'd have appointments with Melia, but actually, no, I didn't. I didn't see you at all because of COVID.
Yeah.
So it was just all, with Kara, our athletic trainer, and then Jimmy, and it was in the garage by myself. So it was just, holding myself accountable and trying to, pull on the things that you taught me with in terms of core and pelvic floor strength. And just a lot. It was a tough period of time, not just because of COVID and doing it in my garage, but also I had an infant. So I was like, breastfeeding him and then going down and working out for like an hour and then going back and breastfeeding and having Zoom calls, all these things. And it was really hard. But I remember like there was one moment where I'm like, I'm going to make this Olympic team and I'm going to look back on this moment because this is when no one's watching. Like I'm holding myself accountable to do this and people are going to see the end result. But a lot of people aren't going to understand this journey. And so I was like, all right, this is awesome because this is what when I look at the greats, like this is it. Like these are the moments when no one's watching and it's like, what do you do in these moments? And so I was happy
Yeah.
that I had that to turn to. Like I had that moment for myself. And so what was I going to do with it?
So beautiful. Like, it's just such a beautiful sentiment to share. And I'm so glad that you are shining light on that, because you're right. Like, so many people have no idea, especially this past Olympics, like what it really took to be able to show up there, right? Like training in your garage, having a baby, relearning how to jump in a way where there's a little bit of fear too with your body. You're like, I don't know this body yet. So you're kind of like having to walk this new line of understanding your body, of not having any kind of security for what the future holds. Like, and it's a lot. As if becoming a mom isn't hard enough. You had a lot of things you were juggling.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Like you said, though, it's that unknown was the scariest part, which makes sense. If we know what the outcome is, there's no fear behind that. But this was the first time in my career where there was just a lot of unknown. Like I didn't know if I was ever going to be able to get back to where I was athletically. And not to say, I don't necessarily think I necessarily am back to where I was athletically. You know, I don't think I'm the same person. I'm just a different version of myself now. But I didn't know if I was going to make the team. There was just a lot of unknowns. And so I think it was just carrying on and trying to keep faith without knowing the outcome.
Oh, absolutely. So as you were working out in your garage and breastfeeding and trying to manage your diastasis and trying to find some hope there, was there a point where you're like, okay, I think I got this, or I feel like I'm ready. I feel like it's clicking. Did you ever have that feeling?
It honestly wasn't until, so I was working out in my garage. I think the girls, some had started going back to training at the gym. I want to say in July, maybe May, June, July. I'm not sure exactly, but I wasn't, because my mom was living with us. She'd been diagnosed with breast cancer earlier that year, and with COVID and everything, like we just wanted to be really safe. So I didn't go to the gym for a while. And when I eventually did, it was just one-on-one, like me and the coaches, and that's it. So I just wasn't with the other girls in training. And so I ended up re-signing with my team here in Japan, which all credit goes to them for having faith in me. It's a big unknown. I hadn't even played 6-on-6 volleyball since before my pregnancy, when I was with this team back before I was pregnant. So I joined them and I came here in September of 2020. And it wasn't until I would say December of 2020 where I felt like, okay, like I can do this. So even though I was playing all this time for these few months and finally getting back to playing 6-on-6, feeling like I had enough strength to hit a ball and serve a ball. It took even more time before I felt like, okay, I kind of feel like myself again.
Right. So that was about a little tiny bit over a year postpartum for you, when you were in Japan and starting to, get a feel for, okay, maybe I am starting, maybe I still have it. Right. So what was your diastasis like around that year point postpartum? And this might be a question for Melia too. I don't know at what point there was that correspondence.
I don't honestly, if you've noticed, I've blocked a lot of things out of my memory, the hard things.
Okay.
I don't know.
Things were quite literally had a ton going on and a ton of changes. So it's okay to not have like an exact answer at all.
Yeah. I want to say by that point, it was maybe like 2.5 to 3.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
I would say.
I think at that point we were just by email and text and that type of thing, because I don't think I actually saw her in a visit before she went to Japan, an in-person visit. So it was a lot of communication, virtually, that type of thing. But I remember her she finally felt strong enough at that point where she was serving and jumping. There was that progression of, okay, how do I get to serve? Jump serve was a big part for you, was trying to get back to that jump serve. And a portion of that was, do we try bracing? Do we try taping? Do we try? And I think this was even during that unknown, not knowing if the Olympics was going to go. So we were trying a lot of different things. And your coaching staff was like, let's try some bracing. Let's try what else can we give you to get some core connection, because you were having some of that shoulder issue. So there was still a lot of trial and error that we were doing, trying to get you potentially to be ready for play. And it just kind of, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? But at the point when you went to Japan, I think you were probably brought back that that tension, and you were jumping, you were serving, all of that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that tension is such a critical piece because that's what helps generate power. So beyond just if her abs were approximating or not, if she's able to generate more tension in her midline, then that helps her generate more power overhead and just creates a stronger system as a whole. So that's why in the diastasis world, it's not just the approximations, also what that fascia is doing and getting it stronger over time. And so fortunately, with the training that you were doing, the patients that you had, and getting that timeline extended a little bit really worked, I think, in the favor of getting your abs to a place where they can also support your performance, which is so key.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So can we talk a little bit about, because I remember we had a really powerful conversation, but this was early on, about like the aesthetics of the diastasis and how hard that was, especially as a professional athlete.
Yeah, that's
Get all
still
vulnerable with me and just dive right in.
No, it's good. Honestly, that's still the biggest thing for me because well, let's go back. When I first found out that I had this, and I remember talking to Melia about it, and I was like, all right, like it looks ugly. My stomach looks ugly and disgusting to me, I'm sure to everyone, but at that point, like, I don't care because I just want to make this team. So I don't care about the aesthetics. Like, I just want the function. So what can I do to get it there? But now that I'm there, in a sense, I think that's the hardest thing for me is I was used to having like 6-pack abs, and now I have to think about the kind of clothes I wear. Like, how does it fall? I can't wear like tight clothes. I can't, like things I never, ever had to think about. That's my new life. And so part of me is like, okay, it sucks. It really sucks. But then also, my body has gone through so much, and it's created this beautiful boy that I have. And it's gotten to me to a level where I can call myself a 3-time Olympian. So, there's positives, there's negatives. I know down the road I would, I still want to have more kids. And so down the road I will be having surgery, but in the meantime, it is definitely a struggle for me.
Yeah. And I think that's like just a really fair thing to acknowledge and talk about. It's like, it's freaking hard to see your body change and then not be able to do a whole lot about it. It's not like, well, if you just worked out a little bit more, or if you just ate, like, just stop eating whatever, like that's not how this works, right? So I know that can just be a really hard mental challenge. And when you add the elite athlete, professional athlete title behind it, it's almost like no, like I would imagine you all hold yourself to a really high self-expectation and expectation from others too. So
I think Foluke took it with such grace though, because I remember having that conversation about, okay, aesthetically, this is going to look very different than functionally. And functionally, we're going to be able to get this a really far distance from where you are now. And if you are going to have more kids, this is something that it might aesthetically look like this for a long time, but you're going to be so much more functional and strong. And this is going to be something that you might want to deal with later aesthetically. But she took it with such grace and said, I do want more kids. I can get stronger. Okay. You've given me the green light. Let's go. Let's move on.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like really playing that long game of like, okay, this is my life. I want the long game of performance. I want the long game of my goals. I want the long game of fitness and the long game of becoming a mom again and again and again, however many times. So I think you just had such a great spirit and just so much grace. And that was evident very early on too, at least from our perspective.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So you're at a year postpartum. You feel like you're kind of turning a corner here. Can you tell us what those months were like leading up to the Olympics? Because most of us have no idea what that process actually is like.
Yeah. So I had my season here in Japan, and I think we finished around April. And so during that time, our coaching staff was watching our matches. So they were able to, it's called through volumetrics, they're able to watch our matches and give feedback. And I remember having a call with Karch probably in January, and he'd watch one of my matches, and he was like, hey, like, you're great, but you're also not good at this, and this. And it's concerning, you know. It's like, all right, like, that's tough to hear, because like I said, in December, like, it's like, all right, I feel pretty good. Like, I think I can do this. And then to hear like, oh, you're not that as good as you think you are. Naturally, as an athlete, an elite athlete, that sucks to hear. You have somewhat of an ego, but at the same time, I mean, how I've dealt with my career is like, all right, I'm going to process this, and then what can I do to get better? And so that was yeah, my goal for the rest of my time in Japan. Like, how can I get better at these specific things that he's talking about? And so I worked at that, and then got back home in April, and we had in May, end of May, we left for a tournament called Volleyball Nations League, and they condensed it. It's usually about like 6 weeks, and I think we were gone for maybe like 4 weeks. I don't remember, honestly. And so we were in Italy in a bubble, and so we were just, yeah, that was interesting. But through that process, there were about 18 of us that made the team, and they selected the Olympic roster from those 18. Wow. So we whittled it down to 12. And this is all while we were all in Italy together. And we knew that after the first week or 2 weeks, they were going to determine the team and make that roster team. So it was just a lot. They'd said before that they were going to determine the team based on our performance during our club seasons, and then as well as how we did during this tournament. So like I said before, there was just so much unknown for me.
Yeah, so much pressure.
A lot of pressure. Yeah, it's just, I've never been there before. Like, I've always been a starter. I've always known my role. I've always known my body. And this is the first time where I didn't know any of those things.
And
so
didn't have that guarantee of being on the team, where you had to like earn your spot back. And I just have to say, in Japan, you did finish, you were named to the top 6. You failed to mention that part. Can you describe that a little bit? And because that was kind of, you ended at the end, he gave you all that almost feedback saying, you need to do this, you need to do this. And then you actually did it.
Right.
Mama Melia stepping in. I love it. Yes, tell us about that.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, well, one of the things he said specifically was about my blocking, and that I needed to be better as a blocker. And then I did win best blocker in the league at the end of the tournament, and then also top 6. You're right. So yeah, it did. I'm so grateful for that feedback that he gave me, because it made me better in the end. But I think that's kind of been my career. Like, I love getting feedback. Of course, it hurts sometimes to hear these things, but it's only going to make me better in the end. And same with you too, the feedback you gave me, you know, when I first learned about the diastasis, like, all right, this sucks to hear, but what can I do to make it better? So yeah, it was nice to know that, like, okay, I can still maybe do this thing. Like, it's still not a guarantee that I'm going to make this Olympic roster, but that alone, you know, coming back as a mom and making that team meant a lot.
Yeah, that is so big time. That is so big time.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you're riding that high, and then how did that translate into how you kept playing?
Into what, sorry?
Like, how did that translate into how you kept playing in the coming
right
months?
Yeah, so I felt pretty good going into the national team, but it's always different when you're used to playing with a certain team, and then you all come together and have been playing elsewhere for months, and you're trying to figure it out with each other. And the unique thing about all of this is that because our national team was pretty young, a lot of these players I never played with because I was pregnant, and I didn't play with them, and even our setters. And so that was my first time playing with them. Whereas my whole career before, I'd played with the same setter for like almost a decade. Right. So I was trying to like relearn. It was weird being like a veteran on the team, but feeling like a newbie. And so
And that's
yeah,
part of the ego too, I would imagine.
yeah, everyone was so sweet though. Like everyone's so almost like too respectful, like
Right.
the young ones, which is great. Like I love them so much. And they're all like so welcoming,
Yeah.
which is weird to say because it's like they're young. Of course, you know, like I should be welcoming to them, right? But no, I mean, I hadn't really been around. And so yeah, I was just getting a connection with them. I think that was my biggest struggle, honestly, all summer is my offensive connection with the setters. And so I ended up making the Olympic team. So we went to Nations League, and after week 2, I believe, like they announced the Olympic roster. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I made it. Like, this is amazing. This has been my goal from the get-go. And then on top of that, we found out the starting lineup at the very end of the tournament, who were going to be the starters for the Olympic team. And I found out that I'd also made that. And so it's like, all right, like this is amazing. But in that, because my connection wasn't great with the setters, I had to switch the position I usually played as the middle. So there's 2 positions, there's M1 and M2, and majority of my career I've played M1. And so I hit the slide like off one leg, like that's my bread and butter, that's what I'm known for. But because I couldn't get that connection down with the setters, I had to switch to an M2, which is something I'd played early on in my career, but not in a long time. So it was another thing, like, all right, I got to adjust and adapt to do whatever it takes. I want to do whatever it takes to help the team and whatever it takes to win this gold medal, which has been our goal for a long time. So and like all of this is to say, like, ego just has to go out the door with all, like everything, my whole journey. It's like, you can't have an ego and try and be successful. So like, all right, like this is different for me, but whatever it takes, I'm going to do it.
Oh, I love it. So tell me about that moment of finding out that you not only made the Olympics, but then being told that you were going to be a starter.
Yeah,
Was that super emotional, or what was it like?
Yeah, making the team, the Olympic team, we like met we were in the hotel. So we, yeah, like had times we were supposed to go into one of the rooms with all the coaches, and they told me. And I think before that I was pretty emotional. I think before that it had been hinted to me that I was going to make the team. So I kind of knew what to expect. But that whole tournament was tough because I was away from home, you know, family couldn't come with me. And again, there was a big unknown. And I also failed to mention that during the season, during my season in Japan, after I'd had that talk with Karch, I like ego. And then I was like, I don't know, I don't want to do this. I don't think I want to do this. I remember telling my husband, like, you know what, I'm not gonna do the national team this summer. Like, I don't need to do this. Like, I already made this, you know, I came back and played, like, I'm good. And he's like, are you sure about this? You know, I think you might regret it when you see everyone else at the Olympics and you're not there. And yeah, that was definitely my ego talking, and me, the whole unknown and fear and unknown, and like, what if I don't make this team? What it's going to look like? So I think it was like going back to those moments and thinking about how I wanted to quit and that I didn't, and being grateful for that. And so I wasn't like crying emotional, but like just grateful for the journey, for sure.
Oh, awesome. That is so awesome. And so through this process leading up to the Olympics, how often did you have to be away from your family? Or were they able to go with you? Like, and obviously COVID messed up some of that stuff. Just give us some insight on that.
Yeah, I was fortunate that my family could come with me to my professional season in Japan, but I feel like I was gone like all summer. I think I spent a total of maybe 8 weeks away in May, June, July, August, in a 4-month period. Mm-hmm. So I was gone a lot. And I'm just fortunate that I have family to hold it down. Like my husband does so much, Jonathan, and my in-laws and my parents. And so I had a lot of help back home, but it was a lot of time spent away from family.
Right. Okay. So you make the Olympic team, you find out you're starting. What was that like? You're there.
There at the Olympics. Yeah. Yeah, kind of surreal. I think it was very different because there were no fans. And so that Olympic experience for me initially was different. The young ones didn't know, like, you don't know what you don't know. So like,
Right.
we're just happy to be here. And I'm like, where are the fans?
Right.
But once we started playing, like knowing that everyone back home was watching, you felt a lot of emotions. And so I think for me, I call it like my worst tournament, just because offense is my thing. And so the fact that that wasn't like clicking for me majority of the tournament was really tough, but I was able to rely on like other aspects of my game. So it was fine. It was just different, but I think the biggest difference, everything was just the team and the girls, and just vulnerability was huge on this team. And we spoke about like our fears before the match. We spoke about how we were nervous and how, some people wanted to throw up, and we're like, hey, that's cool. Like, we got your back. And I think that's something that we never had in the past. And so Sue Enquist, who is with UCLA, she was a softball coach, and she joined our team as a consultant, if you will. Worked a lot with us in terms of the team and mindset, and she doesn't have a psych background, but kind of like played that role for us. And I think because of her, we have this gold medal, and because we were able to sit with each other before the match, like we would be, in the locker room and talk about what we're grateful for and what we're fighting for and anything we're feeling. And I think in the past, like as athletes, we felt like we had to put on this facade, like, I got this, like, I'm fine. But it was okay to say, I'm not fine. And I could tell the team that as well, like, hey, I'm really nervous. Like, I know I've been here before, but I'm worried, like, I don't know if I have it or not. And to have people be like, hey, we got your back, like, we believe in you. But to get that off your chest, like my chest, and everyone be able to get that off their chests, I think it brought us closer and allowed us to lean on each other in the hard moments.
That's really incredible. I'm so thankful that you shared that like intimate experience with us, because I think the perception is so much of like that, like aggressive, like kind of alpha attitude across the board for professional athletes of like, like, let's fucking go. But of course there's that element, but also being able to share the fears and insecurities and whatnot, the vulnerabilities before. I mean, that I would imagine makes it just so much more powerful.
Yeah. I mean, we were literally like bawling, crying before this gold medal match, which is so funny. Like, we were in the locker room, like boohoo crying, and then we're like, all right, let's go, like, we're on. And it's just so funny to think about. But I think getting all that emotion out, clearing the tube, allowed us to be great in those big moments.
Gosh, that is so awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, Melia, I don't know about you, but like my household was like losing our minds watching the games. And I kept telling Kate, I was like, I know her.
Yes,
she's
every
mom, and then we were like, ah.
Every game. There's Foluke. There's Foluke. There's Foluke.
Yes. So just so you know, you're like, we're a big deal in our household.
Yes. They even know that I'm talking to you now, and it's a big deal right now. Yes. So yes.
Yeah. So we were, I mean, obviously so grateful to be even a tiny part of your journey, and you've made so much progress in just sharing, again, this Cinderella story, but that doesn't say, I guess it's a Cinderella story because you won this gold medal, you're a mom, you're this amazing 3-time Olympian, but like what you've been through the last year and a half, 2 years, gosh, like,
yeah,
it's crazy. Like you've just been through a lot. And I think sharing the backstory and what it was actually like to accomplish your dreams in the midst of motherhood is just so powerful.
Thank you. Yeah. And I failed to mention too, that throughout the Olympics, I had back issues too, like lots of back issues, more than I've ever had before. And I know why, so I feel like the journey, it just keeps going, like there's still obstacles I have to face through the diastasis. And so it's like, I'm on that podium and have that gold medal, but there's still, even in that journey in the Olympics, like there were still a lot of obstacles throughout that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't just, I mean, it can get better, but it doesn't necessarily just like go away, especially when you're managing something that is a pretty significant like injury or symptom for you. So it is just kind of doing what you can, controlling what you can, surrendering to a lot of it, and knowing that, you know, there's a lot of hope and potential down the line for you. And you're doing a really great job, I think, of capitalizing on just all of it. Like, you've just done a really incredible job of taking your circumstances and turning it into something really freaking good. Really
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks to you too, really. I think I don't know where I would be. I definitely wouldn't be an Olympian if not for you two. And that, you know, early on in my journey, and having you guys to rely on and just being with me throughout all of it. So thank you to you guys.
You're welcome. I love the story. I just
Yeah.
love hearing all, because some of this I haven't heard from you, you know, just hearing the backstory of even some of the little pieces that you've gone through. And so I really appreciate you opening up and sharing some of those stories with us as well.
Yeah, of course.
I really appreciate it too. And I know that your story, while not all of us are pursuing our third Olympics, a lot of us are pursuing just that lifetime of athleticism and dealing with things that maybe didn't go how we thought they were going to, or changes to our body and experiences that just catch us off guard. And it's a lot to navigate. But something I say all the time is, like, you know, our athleticism doesn't end when motherhood begins. And you're such a shining example of that. And that spectrum is so large. There's room for all of us to pursue whatever level of fitness we want to do. And I mean, I think you've just done a beautiful job of sharing your story, and, you know, we're here to support you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. So we'll wrap up, but what does your near future look like? You're obviously you're in Japan right now, so you're going to keep playing for a bit.
Yeah. So I think we're on day 9 of our 14-day quarantine or house arrest, either one. So we have not left this apartment in 9 days.
Okay.
With an almost 2-year-old.
Yeah.
It's wild. But so yeah, I have my season and it'll end in April. And after that, like, pretty positive I'll be calling it quits. And so I'll be retiring from the sport. But I just feel like it's the right time. There's not really much left to do, you know. I feel like I've been able to accomplish everything I've set out to do. So I'm just gonna enjoy this season here in Japan. Well,
you've had an incredible run, and I hope you enjoy every moment there in Japan, maybe outside of your quarantine here. But we're cheering for you. I know that you're going to gain so many new fans who are just so appreciative of hearing your story just by putting this out there. And yeah, I think you're doing a great job. Thank you for sharing so many vulnerable moments and angles. I know that it's going to help a lot of people. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. All right. Well, Melia, thank you also for being here. I'm so appreciative of the work and collaboration that I'm able to do with you, and for welcoming me into this. So yes, you're amazing.
I mean, I just have to say that I appreciate even your programming too, postpartum, you know, having that outlet for a lot of my women to say, okay, you can do stuff right away. And there's this program out there that's not going to say, it's not going to be too overwhelming, and it's not going to be underwhelming, where even I know, Foluke, your coaching staff in the beginning was kind of surprised when Bree and I had you doing a lot of things in the beginning, and they're like, oh, we thought that she wasn't going to be able to do a lot of this stuff. And they were actually happily surprised that you were doing a lot of lifting right away. And obviously with those modifications. So I just appreciate, Bree, that your programming's out there for a lot of women to utilize.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I love this stuff, you guys. So I'm so appreciative. I think you both are wonderful women, and thank you for letting me be part of it. And thank you guys for coming on the podcast. I know we're coordinating some time zones and whatnot. And Foluke, good luck with the rest of your training. We're cheering for you. Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, guys, have a good one.
Bye.